This is amazing. SpaceX has just submitted a proposal to the FAA for a new Starship trajectory, a first hint that we may soon witness the Starship upper stage landing on Mechazilla for the very first time. Meanwhile, NASA has puzzled the space community by reviving the previously canceled Viper project and awarding hundreds of millions to Blue Origin. Not to be outdone, Europe is also making progress with reusable rockets, aiming to compete directly with the US. Let's dive into this breaking news in today's episode of Alpha Tech. In early 2026, SpaceX is set to attempt a major milestone, launching a Starship to low Earth orbit, then bringing it all the way back down to Boca Chica, Texas, for a precision landing at the launch tower, caught by Mechazilla's giant chopsticks. Achieving this would be a critical step toward Elon Musk's goal of full and rapid reusability, cutting costs and boosting launch cadence. But pulling this landing method won't be easy. It's not just about the rocket or the launch site. It also comes down to the trajectory and the permissions behind it. Unlike super heavy boosters, which only need a short hop before returning to the pad, within minutes the Starship upper stage faces far tougher hurdles. Any orbital return from Texas has to pass through a narrow corridor, avoiding populated areas, while coordinating with the FAA and even international neighbors to secure airspace and meet strict environmental regulations. And as Starship's flight rate grows in the future, those challenges will only intensify. So far, all 10 test flights have followed a safer path, launched from Texas but targeting splashdowns in the Indian or Pacific Oceans. On those trajectories, Starship never completes a full orbit, instead tracing a long arc through space before Earth's gravity pulls it back down. That's why SpaceX has formally requested FAA approval for new Starship launch and landing trajectories out of Starbase, Texas, before attempting such a precision landing. Following this request, on September 19th, the FAA released a 19-page draft document with a long technical title. In short, the draft outlines SpaceX's proposal to update its government license for new Starship launch and re-entry trajectories. While it has not been approved yet, the FAA published it to gather public comments, a required step under NEPA and FAA rules. But if approved, it would be a huge win for SpaceX. Why? FAA rules are extremely strict. For every commercial launch or re-entry, the chance of causing harm to anyone on the ground must be extremely low, less than 1 in 10,000. For any single individual, the risk must be even smaller, far less than 1 in a million. To make this more visual, let's look at the proposed Starship landing path that SpaceX submitted for approval. It passes over northern Mexico. That means SpaceX has to ensure that residents along this corridor will not be affected by any launch or re-entry, even if Starship breaks apart in the atmosphere. Any debris falling back, like what happened earlier this year over the Turks and Caicos Islands, must not endanger people on the ground. Only after demonstrating this safety can the FAA approve the trajectory. One way to reduce risk is to avoid large cities. And that's exactly what SpaceX and the FAA are proposing for these early orbital return attempts. The notional trajectory shows Starship descending over the Pacific, crossing Baja California, then flying inland above regions near Hermosillo and Chihuahua, each with around 1 million residents. From there, Starship's path takes it north of the Monterey metropolitan area, home to over 5 million people, before crossing the Rio Grande Valley near McAllen and Brownsville, Texas. In the final phase of its return, Starship will descend vertically towards Starbase, slowing down so that the launch tower's mechanical arms can catch it in midair. Because these routes pass over populated areas, careful coordination with the FAA is essential to manage both safety and air traffic. The proposed launch and re-entry trajectories would require temporary airspace closures, potentially delaying or rerouting anywhere from 7 to 400 commercial flights per mission. Airspace closures are already mandatory for Starship test flights, but the new return paths over Mexico could involve shutting down more than 6,600 kilometers of airspace, affecting up to 200 additional commercial flights. While these restrictions might inconvenience airlines or passengers, FAA reports from 2022 and 2025 confirm that the plan is not expected to impact employment, income, taxes, population, public services, or other social conditions. In fact, each Starship launch draws crowds of spectators, providing a boost to the local economy, another factor in SpaceX's favor for receiving approval. This environmental assessment also examines potential impacts from the temporary airspace closures, including aviation emissions, air quality, hazardous materials, noise, and socioeconomics. Other factors, such as wildlife, cultural resources, water, or children's health and safety, are not affected and therefore were not considered. Mitigation measures from previous assessments ensure that SpaceX's launch program does not cause significant environmental impacts, and the company continues to comply with all these measures. Regarding noise, airspace closures may cause flight delays or rerouting, temporarily increasing noise at affected airports. However, because aircraft follow existing flight paths and these effects last only 40 minutes to 2 hours, average sound levels do not change significantly. Therefore, these activities are not expected to have major impacts on the environment or surrounding communities, consistent with earlier assessments. And here's the key takeaway. In the conclusion of the draft, the FAA clearly stated that no significant impacts would occur as a result of the proposed action. This serves as a partial green light in the NEPA environmental review process, signaling that the FAA is paving the way for SpaceX to move forward with final approvals and future Starship launches from Starbase. Now, just as SpaceX is waiting for the final approval from the FAA, Blue Origin has unexpectedly received a rare boost from NASA. Just recently, NASA's official X account announced, after exploring innovative and cost-effective approaches, NASA has selected Blue Origin to deliver the Viper rover to the moon. This surprised the entire space community, as NASA had originally selected and begun developing Viper in 2019 as a direct agency project. However, in July 2024, the mission was canceled, even though the rover had been fully assembled and passed rigorous environmental tests. The primary reason was a projected $1 billion cut to NASA's science programs in 2025, forcing the agency to prioritize other critical projects. Development costs had also surged from the initial $250 million to $450 million, far exceeding the original estimate. Launch schedules were repeatedly pushed back from 2023 to 2024, and then to 2025, due to technical issues with Astrobotic's Griffin lander and broader supply chain challenges. Continuing Viper at that time also risked disrupting other projects under NASA's Commercial Lunar Payload Services program, including flights by Intuitive Machines and Firefly Aerospace, which play a key role in the agency's lunar exploration plans. Now, Viper is back, set to ride aboard Blue Origin's Blue Moon Mark 1 lander, a vehicle that has yet to fly. NASA awarded the company a $190 million contract for this mission, marking Blue Origin's second CLPS project. According to the agency, the first Mk1 lander is still scheduled to deliver 2 NASA payloads to the moon's south pole on a New Glenn rocket from Cape Canaveral later this year. Viper will head to the moon's south pole, aiming to map potential resources such as ice and gather scientific data for future lunar and Martian exploration. Acting NASA Administrator Sean Duffy said, NASA is leading the world in exploring more of the moon, and this delivery is just one of the ways we leverage American industry to support a sustained human presence on the lunar surface. Unlike Mars rovers, NASA has managed over the past 3 decades, Viper must withstand extreme temperature swings of up to 500 degrees Fahrenheit between sunlit and shadowed regions. To accomplish this, it will be the first rover equipped with headlights to explore permanently shadowed lunar craters. Duffy added that the rover will navigate these harsh environments in small, obscured areas at the South Pole to provide critical information for future astronaut landing sites and better understand lunar conditions, knowledge crucial for sustaining human life during longer missions. The mission is currently planned for late 2027, using the second Mk1 lander, which Blue Origin has stated is already under production. This raises even more questions, since the Mk1 will eventually be launched on Blue Origin's New Glenn rocket, the company's most advanced launcher, which has so far only flown once and ended with a failed landing. Will Blue Origin be able to meet the requirements for the NASA-assigned mission in the coming years? Or are we looking at yet another delay? If the company succeeds and Viper reaches the moon, the rover is set to undertake a 100-day mission covering a distance of 12 miles, spanning 3 full lunar day-night cycles. According to published information, Viper is equipped with a 1-meter drill and 3 science instruments to detect the distribution, physical state, and composition of ice layers. Communication with the rover will be easier and more real-time compared to Mars missions, and its design allows it to both roll and crawl at a maximum speed of 0.5 miles per hour over truly unknown terrain. As the customer, NASA will rely on Blue Origin to provide the ride, handle payload integration, manage planning and support, supply communications, and deploy the rover. NASA will take over control of the rover once it leaves the lander. The rover's goal of searching for volatiles is meant to support NASA's Artemis missions. Locating frozen water, which could be separated into oxygen and hydrogen for breathable air and potential fuel, has been a primary driver behind NASA's moon plans. In this way, Blue Origin could still compete directly with SpaceX in the future. While SpaceX is known for its HLS lander, Blue Origin contributes to lunar surface exploration through its rover. Both companies play important but different roles in supporting moon missions. It's not just American companies making progress. Space competition in Europe is heating up rapidly as well. This week, the French aerospace company Ariane Group announced that it has completed integration of the Themis rocket, a reusable prototype designed to test various landing technologies, on a launch pad in Sweden. Themis will undergo low-altitude hop tests, laying the groundwork for developing a first stage capable of vertical landing after orbital launches. These tests are expected to begin later this year or early next year, marking a significant step forward for Europe after a slow response to the reusable rocket trend over the past decade. With the prototype in place, Ariane Group will conduct integrated testing to ensure compatibility between Themis and the pad's mechanical, electrical, and fluid systems. This phase will culminate in a full cryogenic test before progressing to low-altitude hop tests. Just like with every other Starship flight, the U.S. Coast Guard usually puts out a local notice to mariners, or LNM, before the FAA issues its NOTAM. Not always strictly first, but most of the time, the Coast Guard gets a jump on things, working with SpaceX on preliminary schedules, since fishing boats out at sea move slowly and sometimes take a full week just to get back to shore. Just yesterday, the Coast Guard dropped the latest LNM, and the space community went buzzing. The notice, number 28909, warns about upcoming launch operations from Pad A at Starbase. It comes with a detailed map showing a wide exclusion zone in the Gulf of Mexico, marked in blue, stretching straight from Boca Chica's launch site. This is the area where debris from the Super Heavy booster or its hot staging ring could fall after stage separation, or where the booster itself might land. Since this is a reused booster, SpaceX isn't aiming for Mechazilla this time. Most importantly, the LNM has officially suggested the launch window for Starship Flight 11, October 6th through October 12th. Each day's window runs from 11:15 p.m. to 1:22 a.m. UTC the following day. For anyone watching in U.S. Central Time, that works out to a 6:15 p.m. start, a prime slot to catch both liftoff and the all-important landing attempts right after work. The schedule has been carefully planned to maximize visibility and ensure the collection of as much data as possible. The earliest possible liftoff is October 6th, which means the rocket definitely won't fly before that date. And the remaining days in the window, through October 12th, serve as backup opportunities in case of any last-minute adjustments, weather issues, or technical delays. This is a strong signal that SpaceX is accelerating its launch turnaround. If liftoff happens on the 6th, that would set a new record of just 41 days between flights, counting from Flight 10 back in August. And that's despite the setbacks, like the issues at Massey's test site and the need to repeatedly install and remove adapters on the orbital launch mount just to pull off the upper stage's static fire. Without those hiccups, the record might have been even better. So now, while we wait on the FAA to issue a NOTAM locking down airspace and formally approving the launch, it looks very likely that sometime next week we'll see Ship 38 and Booster 15 roll out to the pad. Personally, I'm still betting on October 8th for the launch. What about you? Drop your guess in the comments below. Back at Starbase, around 1 a.m. on September 24th, Ship 38 was rolled into Megabay 2 after its full static fire and returned from Pad 1. It stayed right by the doors, and about an hour later, the workers closed up shop, so no one really knows what went on inside. Most likely it just sat there overnight, giving engineers easy access to check the ship. The engines, fresh off that intense static fire, were the top priority, each one carefully inspected to make sure nothing got damaged and everything's ready for the next flight. Then came the heat shields, the real heroes of re-entry. These plates have to survive crazy heat, vibrations, and pressure, and Ship 38 has a more complete setup than the prototypes before, with big upgrades like the crunch wrap design. Engineers went over every inch to see if it can survive the harsh ride back through the atmosphere and to spot any risks that need fixing. Other systems weren't left out. Cargo bays, fuel tanks, composite overwrapped pressure vessels, aft flaps, fuel lines, all got a thorough once-over. Past lessons are clear. Whatever went wrong before Flight 10 can't happen again. Once those inspections wrap up, SpaceX will slot in the payload integration system, hook up the flight termination system, and add a batch of Starlink satellites. Then, Ship 38 will be all set for a smooth rollout to the pad. Still at the bay, Super Heavy Booster 15 is looking better than ever. The hot staging setup is already complete, and it may even have its own flight termination system installed. Basically, that means it's ready to roll out to the launch pad at a moment's notice. Outside Megabay 2, crews kept grinding through the night, finishing the foundations of the new Gigabay. Soon, that massive building will completely block any direct view into Megabay 2. Kinda sad for us space fans, but hey, it's the trade-off we have to accept for faster launch and production cycles, especially with all the rapid test flights happening these days. Now, let's shift over to the Massey test site, which has been partially back in action since early September, following repairs from the Ship 36 explosion back in June. With those fixes in place, adjustments can be carried out much faster. Cryogenic tests for V3 tanks like 18.3 ran here from September 16th to 20th, showing the site is ready to fully support operations. After that, the tank shells will be installed on the OLM along with other refurbishment work. SpaceX estimates it will take about a week to get the launch mount fully operational again for the mission. All of this underscores one clear fact. The next Starship flight is very close. Flight 11 isn't about setting records or racing the clock, it's about success. And that success will kick off what SpaceX calls the V3 era, a critical phase where the company has to hit new milestones to prepare for future missions to the Moon and Mars. Back on the V3 front over the past few weeks, there are clear signs that SpaceX is finishing up the first two vehicles of Starship version 3, Booster 18 and Ship 39. Let's start with Booster 18. On September 19th, observers spotted the aft section being moved from the Star Factory into MB1. Take a good look. This is the very first V3 aft section we've seen, complete with the fuel transfer tube SpaceX revealed a few months back. It won't be long before the first V3 booster is fully assembled, and honestly, the wait is getting exciting. As for Ship 39, things have been quieter. The most recent update goes back to late August, when a rover cam outside caught a bridge crane stacking Ship 39's nose cone onto the payload bay section. The nose cone already has a substantial number of ceramic heat shield tiles installed. Realistically, we'll likely have to wait until October for more concrete updates. Ship 39 will probably have to wait until the Massey site finishes its cryo testing area to run its initial tests, which could fall toward late October or early November. And as mentioned, Massey is progressing really well. With the site coming online, SpaceX has finally put an end to all the OLM modifications at the launch pad that were previously required just to test Starship's upper stage. With Massey fully operational, these tests can now run much more smoothly. Those are the latest updates from SpaceX. On the NASA side, things are moving along nicely with the Artemis II mission. Mission managers shared on September 23rd at the agency's Johnson Space Center that Artemis II, a 10-day mission taking 4 astronauts on a loop around the Moon aboard NASA's Orion spacecraft, could launch as early as February 5, 2026, with the latest possible launch date in April 2026. NASA officials noted that if the mission does take off in February, the launch window would likely fall during nighttime hours. Still, Lakeisha Hawkins, NASA's Deputy Administrator for Exploration Systems Development, emphasized that crew safety will ultimately dictate the timeline. Hawkins said, "We want to stress that safety is our top priority," she added. "So as we move through operational preparations, and after the rocket is fully assembled, we continue to evaluate every step, to make sure everything is done safely. The reason NASA is confident about this early schedule is that the Space Launch System rocket for Artemis II is already stacked and declared flight ready. Meanwhile, the Orion spacecraft is in its final preparations and is set to be mounted on top of the rocket later this year. Early next year, the combined stack will be transported to the launch site at Kennedy Space Center. Once on the pad, the rocket and spacecraft will be hooked up to ground systems, and about 2 weeks later, they'll run a wet dress rehearsal test. During this fueling exercise, both the first and second stages of the rocket will be loaded with liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen, and the countdown will be brought down to T-minus 29 seconds. After the test, the rocket will be drained and returned to its normal launch position. Because of Earth and Moon orbital alignments, plus other mission constraints, each month only offers a launch window of about 4 to 8 days. After liftoff, Orion will separate from the SLS upper stage just over 3 hours into flight. It will spend roughly 24 hours in Earth orbit, during which the 4 astronauts on board will run a series of checks to ensure life support systems, thrusters, and other spacecraft systems are fully operational. If all goes smoothly, Orion will perform a main engine burn to send it on a free return trajectory around the Moon. On this path, the spacecraft will travel roughly 8,000 to 14,000 kilometers beyond the Moon before heading back to Earth, designed so that it can complete the mission even if the propulsion system encounters any issues. After completing its Moon missions, SpaceX will shift focus toward the next frontier, missions to Mars and beyond. Scientists today are increasingly looking at exploring asteroids and the outer solar system using nuclear-powered rockets. The idea is simple. Use the energy from a fission reaction in liquid uranium to heat the propellant and generate thrust. The technology they're exploring, called the Centrifugal Nuclear Thermal Rocket, or CNTR, is particularly exciting. Its potential can be summed up by its specific impulse, essentially a measure of how efficiently a rocket produces thrust. In theory, CNTR could double the specific impulse of earlier nuclear thermal rocket designs from the 1950s, which are still under study by NASA and DARPA, and deliver roughly 4 times the efficiency of conventional chemical rockets. Even though no nuclear-powered rocket has ever flown, space agencies around the world are increasingly seeing nuclear propulsion as the key to faster interplanetary travel. The reasoning is simple. The longer we stay in space, the more health risks astronauts face. So anything that can cut that travel time is a huge win. Traditional nuclear thermal rockets use solid uranium fuel to heat liquid hydrogen until it expands through a nozzle at high velocity, generating thrust. The CNTR takes it a step further. It uses liquid uranium in a spinning cylinder, hence the centrifugal name, maximizing fission reactions and boosting engine efficiency like never before. In theory, CNTR technology could take spacecraft farther using less fuel, making fast missions between Earth and the Moon possible, or even enabling crewed round trips to Mars in just 420 days, instead of the 2.5 to 3 years it takes with chemical rockets. Hydrogen doesn't necessarily have to be the only type of fuel. A variety of materials could be used, some of which might be extracted from asteroids, comets, and Kuiper Belt objects along the way, once again enabling missions to travel extremely long distances. The hope is that SpaceX will get involved and successfully apply this technology, bringing Musk's Mars dreams closer to reality than ever before. Following an inspection visit to Starbase last month to check on HLS progress, members of NASA's Aerospace Safety Advisory Panel held a rare public meeting on September 19th. An uncommon move aimed at reassessing the status of lunar initiatives and issuing recommendations for future exploration. During the session, concern was raised regarding Artemis III. Panel members suggested that the Starship HLS could face delays of several years, potentially becoming the primary factor jeopardizing NASA's goal of a crewed lunar landing in 2027. This assessment was presented by Paul Hill, a former NASA flight director with decades of human spaceflight management experience, who currently advises agency leadership and reports directly to both NASA and the U.S. Congress on safety matters. Hill was joined in the session by former astronauts Charlie Precourt and Kent Rominger. According to Hill, the HLS development timeline remains highly challenging. He noted that although NASA awarded SpaceX the full Option A contract for the human landing system in April 2021, 4 years later, the program has yet to produce a complete vehicle. To date, SpaceX has only released design concepts and conducted preliminary functional tests, which, in Hill's view, are insufficient to instill confidence in the system's readiness. But hold on a second. Does that comparison really make sense? The SLS, for instance, began development back in 2011 and only managed to complete its very first flight in Artemis more than a decade later. NASA proudly calls it a big achievement, but if you look at it objectively, that was 10 full years of work. By contrast, SpaceX has had just 4 years since the HLS contract award, so calling their pace slow doesn't quite hold up. And let's not forget the money. Developing SLS and its costly mobile launch infrastructure has already burned through an eye-watering $35 to $40 billion. SpaceX, meanwhile, has received barely $4 billion to cover 2 separate HLS contracts. Wow, so NASA gives them barely 1/10 the funding of SLS, yet expects them to move at twice the pace. It's hard not to see that as stacking the deck against SpaceX, then turning around and blaming them for delays. After that, Hill chimed in, "No competitor, whether government or industry, has the full mix of factors driving such a high production and flight cadence, with direct impacts on both reliability and cost reduction." In other words, he was essentially mocking SpaceX, implying that building a rocket that is cheap to launch, fully reusable, and flying at a rapid cadence is basically impossible. It's as if he was saying, Elon Musk is chasing pipe dreams. Later in the meeting, Councilmember Bill Bray raised even deeper concerns about the Artemis program. He noted that preparations for Artemis II, currently slated for early 2026, are moving along on track. And to be fair, that does check out. Recently, NASA has tapped into advanced supercomputers and run cutting-edge wind tunnel tests to refine the SLS for Artemis II, the first crewed mission around the moon. These techniques allow engineers to design safer, more efficient structures, while predicting exactly how the vehicle will respond under pressure. But while Artemis II seems solid, Bray stressed that the outlook quickly grows uncertain beyond that point. He cautioned that the panel also sees the path forward for Artemis III and beyond as uncertain and somewhat vague, and that is not good for the safety and risk posture of the program going forward. Similar to Hill, Bill Bray also raised concerns about Elon Musk quietly pushing back the timeline for proving one of the most critical technologies, cryogenic propellant transfer. This process is absolutely essential because before heading to the moon, Starship will need to refuel in low Earth orbit. Originally, Musk promised this demo would happen by late 2025, then it slipped into 2026. Why? Mainly because the new Starship V3, the first version capable of performing such a transfer, has itself been delayed, not to mention constant upgrades to the Raptor 3 engines. And even if SpaceX does hit that timeline, success is far from guaranteed. The challenge is enormous. The HLS lander and a Starship tanker will have to rendezvous and dock in orbit, aligning within just a few centimeters, all while moving at orbital speeds. Then comes the massive scale. An Artemis lunar mission would require 8 to 20 separate tanker launches to fully fuel the lander, roughly 1,200 tons of propellant in total. That means maintaining a launch cadence of 1 flight every day or 2. Former NASA Administrator Mike Griffin even put numbers on it. Each transfer might have a 98% chance of success, but string together 15 to 20 of them, and the overall odds drop to just 67 to 74%. And remember, just one failure could jeopardize the entire mission, which is exactly why NASA is so worried about the feasibility of HLS. Valid concerns, sure, but Elon Musk wasn't having any of it. He immediately fired back. In reality, Elon Musk didn't respond to NASA directly. Instead, he took aim indirectly, through a New York Times article that had criticized SpaceX's HLS progress. His response? It's not worth lining a parrot cage with New York Times, let alone reading it. In a recent Space News article about the HLS program, a NASA fan suggested that maybe the agency should ditch SpaceX's lander and go with Blue Origin's lunar lander for Artemis III instead. Elon Musk's reply? Just a casual lull. Short but cutting. The remark dripped with sarcasm, essentially mocking both the Times and NASA officials' comments as outdated, false, and biased. The article had even brought up supposed tensions between Musk and former President Trump, suggesting that those clashes once threatened to cut SpaceX's contracts and slow down HLS funding. But Musk's dismissal makes sense because that narrative doesn't hold up. Just recently, at a memorial event for activist Charlie Kirk in Arizona, Musk was seen walking up to Trump, sitting right beside him, and exchanging a warm handshake and friendly conversation. Clearly, there's no sign of the political fallout the Times tried to spin, which makes their claims of funding cuts nothing more than fake news. Secondly, HLS is definitely not going to be ready this year, but next year, that's a much safer bet. Right now, SpaceX simply isn't revealing progress until certain milestones are reached. Still, leaks keep slipping out, from hardware and airlock to even the crew seats. And most recently, they've started building a dedicated test tower for the HLS landing system at Massey's site. This drone photo shows the scaffolding going up for what will become a full-scale rig to simulate lunar landings. So, with just 4 short years of development, that's actually not bad progress at all. No wonder Elon Musk sounds so confident, because behind the scenes, SpaceX is clearly moving faster than most people realize, and history backs that confidence up. Within just a single year, from 2026 to 2027, SpaceX could realistically complete every critical HLS milestone before Artemis 3 is on the pad, including orbital refilling and even a full lunar landing test. After all, this kind of rapid turnaround isn't new for them. Remember Falcon 1? After 3 failed attempts, SpaceX finally nailed the 4th launch on September 28, 2008. Less than 10 months later, the 5th flight on July 13, 2009, was also a success. 2 back-to-back victories that proved the company had cracked the code. From that point on, Falcon 1 was retired, paving the way for Falcon 9, the rocket that would go on to define reliability in modern spaceflight. So, if SpaceX could pull that off back then, why couldn't they do the same with HLS today? And if you believe SpaceX will make it happen, drop a Go HLS in the comments to show your support. Yeah, it's not just Elon Musk. SpaceX COO Gwynne Shotwell has also spoken candidly about HLS and the challenges of orbital refilling. She pointed out that while Starship is still very much in development, the August 26th test flight, Flight 10, was a crucial win. My Starship team needed that victory, Shotwell said, noting how the 3 prior test flights ended with anomalies that cut the missions short. I was really happy. They did a great job. We achieved every single mission objective we wanted. Looking ahead, Shotwell explained that Flight 11 will see another upgraded Starship V2, but the real focus is already shifting to the far more powerful Starship V3, with its debut launch planned for late this year or early next. This is truly the vehicle that can take humans to the Moon and Mars, she emphasized. One of the earliest and most critical tests for V3 will be orbital propellant transfer, the key technology alongside the heat shield that SpaceX must master. Can we actually move the propellant? Will it stay cold enough? That's really the test. That's what we'll see next year, she said. While docking starships together doesn't worry her much, given SpaceX's extensive Dragon experience at the ISS, she admitted the fuel transfer itself is a major technical challenge. Hopefully it's not as hard as some of my engineers think it is, she added with a grin. Yes, the challenges are very real. If even SpaceX's top engineers think it's hard, then it won't be easy. But as Shotwell and Musk both point out, the impossible only takes time to prove possible, and early failures are not only expected, but acceptable. As Musk himself said,
Unless we have some very major setbacks, SpaceX will demonstrate full reusability next year, catching both the booster and the ship, and being able to deliver over 100 tons to a useful orbit.
all in all, the words of SpaceX's 2 top leaders give us a clear glimpse into their vision, and perhaps even the company's future. Now, all eyes are on whether they can turn that vision into reality, not just to keep Artemis 3 on schedule, but also to hold the line against China's growing ambitions on the moon. China's space sector is also quietly stepping up. Right now, they've got 2-stage combustion engines already in testing, with 3 more on the drawing board. Just 2 weeks ago, Landspace, a well-known private space company, secretly carried out a test launch and only later revealed the details. They shared more information about the development of their full-flow stage combustion engine, the BF-20, which runs on liquid methane and liquid oxygen. According to Landspace, the BF-20 has already been fired more than 30 times during development, reaching a maximum test thrust of 110 tons. That's about half of its 220-ton target, and already close to the performance of SpaceX's Raptor 2 engine. On top of that, some footage from the recent test has made its way onto social media, and to be fair, it looks pretty impressive. Landspace has been carefully tracking the BF-20's development milestones ever since research kicked off in late 2021, but the engine itself isn't expected to play a major role until after 2030, when it's set to power the company's next-generation rocket, a massive, fully reusable, 10-meter diameter booster nicknamed Juke 4. In early June, Elon Musk openly criticized President Donald Trump's new tax and spending cuts. And of course, Trump didn't take it lightly. He fired back, threatening to cancel federal contracts with SpaceX, Tesla, and Musk's other companies, calling it the easiest way to save money. On Truth Social, Trump wrote, "The easiest way to save money in our budget, billions and billions of dollars, is to terminate Elon's governmental subsidies and contracts." Now, here's the big deal. SpaceX currently holds around $22 billion in government contracts. If Trump follows through, those deals could be on the chopping block, and several major U.S. space programs might face serious shakeups. Out of that $22 billion, about $15 billion comes from NASA, covering everything from routine Falcon 9 launches to the development of the Starship human landing system. You know, the one NASA's planning to use to land astronauts on the moon later this decade. And don't forget the $5 billion contract for the Dragon capsule, which handles crew and cargo missions to the International Space Station. The remaining $7 billion comes from the Department of Defense. That includes launching national security satellites, providing secure military internet through Starlink, and other classified missions. In fact, just 2 days ago, SpaceX launched the Space Force's X-37B spaceplane on its 8th mystery mission from Launch Complex 39A using their Falcon 9. The goal? To test new communication systems and further prove the reusability of this unique spaceplane. So, yeah, we're talking about serious money and critical missions here. That's why some people are now questioning whether SpaceX has become too dependent on taxpayer-funded contracts, money that comes straight from the pockets of everyday Americans. But if you're thinking along those lines, you might want to hit pause, because Elon Musk himself pushed back on that idea just recently. In a post, he explained, "The total revenue that SpaceX will receive from NASA this year is about $1 billion out of roughly $15 billion total, so around 7%. He also pointed out that all of these contracts were won through competitive bids, meaning if SpaceX didn't get them, the government would probably be paying a lot more to someone else. Yeah, those comments pretty much made NASA lose face. Even though they didn't come out and criticize Musk, and on paper, NASA and SpaceX are still really close partners, what he said still put the agency in a pretty awkward spot. So why is that? Well, everything Musk said checks out. SpaceX's revenue this year is projected to hit about $15.5 billion. And that number isn't pulled out of thin air. When SpaceX released its year-end report for 2024, they estimated $13.1 billion, and in the end, they only missed by about 1.5%. So for 2025, most of that $15.5 billion is expected to come from Starlink. They're aiming for 7.6 million subscribers and around $12.3 billion in revenue. As of June, the Starlink constellation had 7,578 satellites in orbit, with 7,556 of them active, and that number is only going to keep growing. The rest comes from things we already talked about: satellite launch contracts for other organizations, and crew and cargo transport services to the ISS. But here's the kicker, the NASA piece. That's only about $1 billion. Out of $15.5 billion in total revenue, that works out to just 6.67%. So, when Musk said 7%, he was actually rounding up a little. Bottom line, NASA makes up only a tiny slice of SpaceX's annual revenue. And that really drives home the point. SpaceX has a diverse income stream and doesn't depend on NASA to survive or grow. But that's not all. The NASA contracts that SpaceX wins aren't handed to them as a favor. They earn them through fair competition against other players. Think about it. What company can really compete with SpaceX when it comes to ferrying astronauts to the ISS with Dragon, Boeing's Starliner? If it were that reliable, it wouldn't have run into problems that left astronauts Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams stranded on the station for 9 months. And as of now, it still hasn't completed a second flight. And what about Russia's Soyuz? NASA has to pay around $85 million per seat for that old, outdated spacecraft. An experience that isn't exactly comfortable for astronauts. Dragon, the NASA Office of Inspector General, estimates a nominal value of about $55 million per seat, and it's far more modern and comfortable. Similarly, SpaceX's Falcon 9 can launch a satellite for $60 to $90 million, far cheaper than ULA's Delta IV, heavy at $400 million. This cost advantage isn't just about money, it's a clear sign of SpaceX's efficiency and innovation, which also played a big role in the Artemis program. There, SpaceX beat out Blue Origin to win a $2.89 billion contract to develop Starship, thanks to its cutting-edge design and lower-cost potential. Musk's statement isn't just bragging, it underscores the hard truth. Without SpaceX, NASA would be paying many times more, or might even struggle to complete critical missions, like ferrying astronauts to the ISS. This reliance puts NASA in a tricky spot, especially as SpaceX continues to prove its edge with Starship Flight 10, pushing forward the HLS version to meet the needs of Artemis 3, a mission-critical link NASA simply can't do without. Which raises the real question. Is SpaceX relying on NASA, or is it actually NASA that relies on SpaceX? I think you already know the answer. So, what's the real punchline of Musk's statement? He said it clearly. There are 0 handouts. 0. Exactly. Musk is stressing once again that SpaceX doesn't get any free government handouts. Every dollar the company receives is payment for specific services, ferrying astronauts, delivering cargo, or developing Starship, based entirely on the value SpaceX provides. This statement directly counters the idea that SpaceX is thriving on government subsidies, while also reinforcing the company's philosophy of self-reliance and business efficiency. And he made this statement right before Starship Flight 10, driving home the point. SpaceX is a private company that succeeds on its own technological capability and sustainable business model without needing NASA's charity. Here's something else to put it in perspective. In the Commercial Crew Program, NASA awarded contracts to both SpaceX, $2.6 billion for Crew Dragon, and Boeing, $4.2 billion for Starliner. Crew Dragon successfully launched in 2020 and has completed over 10 crewed missions to the ISS. Starliner, on the other hand, has struggled with technical issues, including software glitches and leaking valves, and as of 2025 is still not certified for regular crew flights. Its uncrewed test mission in 2022 failed, and the first crewed mission in 2024 ran into problems, forcing NASA to delay plans. What's striking is that even though Boeing went over budget and kept falling behind schedule, NASA continued to support them and poured in more money. Meanwhile, SpaceX finished its contract on time and under budget. The point is clear. SpaceX isn't just more efficient, it's also more reliable. No handouts, no special favors, just results, all thanks to Elon Musk's leadership. But the drama didn't stop there. SpaceX and Elon Musk soon found themselves caught up in a federal tax controversy. Specifically, multiple reports claimed that SpaceX relies heavily on government contracts, but has paid little to no federal income taxes. Haha, if you're still with me, you're probably thinking, wait, seriously? According to some articles, SpaceX may have paid very little or nothing in federal income taxes since its founding in 2002. And Musk reportedly told investors that the company might never have to pay any federal income taxes. The financial situation of the rocket maker has long been kept secret since SpaceX is a private company. However, documents reviewed by these reports suggest that SpaceX may be taking advantage of a legal tax provision, allowing the company to use over $5 billion in losses as of the end of 2021 to offset future taxable income. Back in 2017, during his first term, President Trump enacted a change that removed the expiration date for this tax benefit for all companies. For SpaceX, that means nearly $3 billion of those losses can be applied indefinitely against future taxable income. Tax experts say that not paying taxes on $5 billion in taxable income is a significant and notable amount, especially for a company so unusually dependent on U.S. government contracts. SpaceX works closely with the Pentagon, NASA, and other agencies, giving the company a critical role in national security. According to documents in 2020, federal contracts generated nearly 84% of the rocket maker's revenue, a figure that had not been previously reported. By comparison, bigger tech companies, including some that also benefit from tax provisions, typically pay billions in federal income taxes. Microsoft, for example, reported expecting to pay over $14 billion in federal income taxes in the last fiscal year. SpaceX can benefit from this tax provision even as the company's business grows. Using a measure of corporate profitability, the company made roughly $5 billion in profit from core operations last year, up from $2.6 billion in 2023, according to private communications with certain stakeholders. Danielle Bryan, CEO of the Project on the Government Oversight, a watchdog group investigating government corruption and waste, noted that the tax benefit was originally intended to help companies stay afloat in tough times. She called it strange that SpaceX is using it now, since it's clearly not meant for a company doing so well. However, it's important to remember that SpaceX has taken on enormous financial risk over the past 20 years, and using the net operating loss provision is a legally valid reward for those risks. Without NOLs, companies like SpaceX might hesitate to invest heavily in R&D and cutting-edge projects, which are essential for breakthroughs in space technology. Reports indicate that SpaceX has paid some form of income tax over the years, though perhaps not to the federal government. In one document, the company stated it expected to pay $483,000 in foreign taxes and $78,000 in state income taxes in 2021. Additionally, the company reported paying $6,000 in income taxes in 2020 and 2021, but it didn't disclose whether these payments went to the federal, state, or local government. Many reports often overlook that the company still contributes to the tax system through other forms of taxation. This shows that SpaceX isn't breaking the law or deliberately dodging taxes. It's simply legally optimizing its federal income tax. If they were breaking the law, Elon Musk wouldn't exactly be chilling right now, casually relaxing ahead of Starship Flight 10. This is one of the largest rockets ever built, definitely the largest reusable rocket, says Jonathan McDowell, an astrophysicist at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, who tracks rocket launches in his spare time. Starship isn't just a billionaire's toy. It's a launch system designed to revolutionize space travel, sending cargo and crews into orbit at nearly unbelievable costs. And it represents a bright, tech-optimist future, the kind of vision Silicon Valley has always promised. Starship is the backbone of countless plans and projects, and its success could redefine humanity's path in space. Congrats to SpaceX, they never fail to dream big. And every time, they pull off achievements that leave competitors stunned. Can you believe it? In just 9 years, they've turned what used to be nothing but sand and marshland into a rocket paradise, a bustling little city called Starbase, stretching over 150 acres. And they're not stopping there. SpaceX now has its eyes on Florida at Launch Complex LC-39A. But here's the twist. They're not just repeating what they did in Texas, they're already building something even bigger, turning it into the true hub for Starship launches. This isn't just about a launch pad. They're also building a huge Starship star factory and a giant gigabay, both on a larger scale than what they have in Texas. Everything is steadily taking shape, but the launch pad is moving the fastest. And if all goes to plan, it could be ready by the end of this year, around December. As part of that process, the company also needs a launch license from the Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA. Under the National Environmental Policy Act of 1969, that license review includes a full environmental assessment. And on August 4th, SpaceX had a big reason to celebrate. The FAA officially released its long-awaited draft review for the Starship project. That milestone signals SpaceX is getting closer to securing either a brand new license or an update to its existing one, finally clearing the path to launch Starship from Pad 39A at Kennedy Space Center. It's a crucial stepping stone for SpaceX to expand Starship operations beyond Texas and into Florida. But what really got them excited is that this draft isn't just a rehash of the one from 2019, back when they had only just started building the pad. So, what's different this time? Let's just say, quite a bit. Let's start with launch frequency. In the 2019 review, SpaceX requested 24 launches a year. Pretty ambitious back then. But in this new Environmental Impact Statement, or EIS, that number has jumped to 44 launches annually. That's nearly double. And here's where it gets even more interesting: night launches. The old review only allowed about 20% of flights to happen at night, around 5 per year. But this new draft, it says at least half of all flights could take place under the night sky. Of course, that also brings up the issue of noise. According to the draft, the sound from 44 launches and 88 landings every year could exceed 97 decibels A in areas near KSC and Cape Canaveral, loud enough to wake up as much as 82% of local residents during nighttime operations. On the flip side, nighttime launches also reduce disruptions to daily community activities. Still, the noise impact is significant, and the draft highlights the need for mitigation measures, from hearing protection to environmental monitoring. Now, for the biggest change of all, booster recovery. The 2019 assessment was so out of date that it didn't even consider catching a booster with the launch tower. For the Starship itself, the plan only looked at landing at Landing Zone 1 at the Cape, with a possible future modification to allow landings at Pad 39A. But now the new EIS completely changes the game. It actually considers both stages returning to the launch site for every flight. That's right, every single one. In fact, if you look at page 9 of the draft, under Proposed Action and Alternatives, it clearly states up to 44 launches and as many as 88 landings per year. That's SpaceX going all in. And of course, with more launches and more landings comes a larger number of pre-launch tests than before. The rocket itself has already gone through massive changes since 2019, and it's expected to keep evolving even further. In fact, the draft even hints at what's coming next. It points out that, in the future, both Super Heavy and Starship could carry landing legs, letting them touch down on a drone ship at sea as a backup option, instead of relying only on the tower catch. And that's not all. SpaceX is also adding a flame trench with a dual diverter, just like the setup at Launch Pad 2 in Starbase. On top of that, the entire propellant farm is being redesigned. Back in 2019, the plan was for Starship to share Falcon 9's LOX and nitrogen tanks, while the old hydrogen sphere at Pad 39A, once used for Saturn and Shuttle, would be converted into a methane tank. But SpaceX dropped that idea pretty quickly. Even as far back as 2022, while they were still building the older style pad and tower, the company had already started constructing a dedicated propellant farm just for Starship. And yes, a catch tower. That's right. In addition to the integration tower used for launches, SpaceX will build a separate tower designed solely for catching Starship. Now, this isn't entirely surprising. The FAA already flagged it last year when they announced their intent. But here's why it matters. While the launch integration tower can technically handle a super heavy landing, having a dedicated catch tower would reduce the amount of refurbishment needed on the pad between flights. That means faster turnaround times and far more efficient launch operations. Interestingly, at Starbase, there's no sign of them building a dedicated catch tower, which only makes one thing clear: LC-39. A isn't just another launch site. SpaceX is setting the stage to transform it into the true powerhouse for Starship launches. But there's one more facility that mirrors what SpaceX has just started developing at Starbase, an air separation unit, or ASU, right there in Florida. This system will pull in air straight from the atmosphere and distill it into oxygen and nitrogen, which can then be liquefied for Starship operations. The natural gas processing plant, however, won't be built right away. That means, at least for the first launches, SpaceX will have to truck in propellants until those facilities are up and running. And the draft EIS lays it out clearly. For each launch, we're talking up to 275 trucks of liquid oxygen, over 80 of liquid nitrogen, and 90 of liquid methane. Add that all up, that's as many as 445 trucks for a single launch. Over time, It could mean nearly 20,000 truck trips, hauling hundreds of thousands of tons of construction materials to the pad. That's a serious convoy, one that could snarl traffic at Kennedy Space Center and run into delays from road closures during other launches, not to mention all the side effects that come with it. But that heavy trucking is really just a stopgap. In the long run, SpaceX plans to build and operate its own natural gas processing facility right there at the Cape. It'll take gas supplied by a third-party provider, refine it, and prepare it for use with Starship, including, of course, as the rocket's methane fuel. And this isn't just a refinery. The facility will include a full methane liquefaction unit, turning methane into liquid form for easier storage and faster loading into the vehicle. Since the new pad design uses far more water than what was considered in earlier studies, SpaceX is also proposing to build dedicated water ponds at 39A. That's quite a lot on their plate, right? And all of this is exactly what the new draft EIS lays out on paper. But how does that stack up against what SpaceX is actually building on the ground? Well, let's take a quick look at what's happening right now at LC-39A. SpaceX is close to finishing the fully integrated main launch tower, which consists of 9 sections. The first module has already been set on the concrete foundation, while the second and third modules are prepped and ready to go. Interestingly, some of the tower's steel structure has been reused from Starbase, a smart move that saves both time and cost. At the same time, parts of the giant chopsticks, the arms designed to lift and place Starship onto the mount, have arrived on site after months of repairs and upgrades. The quick disconnect arm is also being reworked, taken apart and modified to match the latest Texas design, with a new work platform added for easier access. Then, on August 16th, a major concrete pour began for the Starship pad's flame trench, forming the trench floor ahead of the steel wall and flame bucket installation. Nearby, the tank farm and support infrastructure are moving fast on the pad's north side. Methane oxygen tanks and pumping systems are going up. Green deluge pipes are being laid in trenches, and preparations are underway for a commodities trench to route data, power, and fluids from the tank farm to the pad. 3 of the 4 massive distribution pipes for the pad's cooling and deluge system are already in place. We've seen all of this before at Starbase Pad 2, so that playbook is basically a step-by-step guide to what the next few weeks will look like at 39A. SpaceX has also made big progress on the water deluge system. More green water lines are going into the trenches already dug for them, and, based on our flyovers, sheet piles have been driven to reinforce the trench walls where these pipes are being installed. Put it all together, and you really start to see the scale of what's happening. From the launch tower and lifting systems, to the water infrastructure, gigabay, and even new fuel facilities. Everything is moving forward fast. According to the FAA review and SpaceX's own plans, the new Starship pad at LC-39A in Kennedy Space Center should be finished by late this year, with launches starting in spring 2026. Once active, SpaceX will have 3 Starship pads, 2 in Texas and 1 in Florida, capable of supporting up to 44 launches and landings annually at 39A alone. This isn't just about more launches. Multiple pads reduce risk, while the catch system for the Super Heavy booster pushes reusability further, potentially cutting costs to $10 to $50 million per flight, well below Falcon 9's $62 million. For SpaceX, the implications are huge. LC-39A will anchor their ability to scale Starlink deployments, deliver Artemis missions for NASA, including Artemis 3's planned lunar landing, and lay the groundwork for crewed flights to the Moon, and eventually Mars, possibly as early as the late 2030s. In short, LC-39A is being transformed into the backbone of Starship's future. Just a few miles away, at LC-36, Blue Origin is ramping up activity too, though chances are things won't go exactly as they hope. Blue Origin is getting ready for the second launch of its heavy-lift New Glenn rocket out of LC-36, set for September 29th, just 5 days after SpaceX's Starship Flight 10. This time, the payload is NASA's Escapade mission, 2 twin probes built by Rocket Lab to study Mars's magnetic field and how solar wind shapes the planet's atmosphere. Once they're in orbit, control shifts to the Space Sciences Lab at the University of California, which is running this $80 million mission. Escapade was originally set to ride on New Glenn's debut back in January, but NASA pulled back. They weren't about to risk such a high-value payload on a rocket's very first flight. You know, Blue Origin just doesn't have the same level of trust yet that SpaceX has built over the years. That maiden launch did reach orbit, delivering Blue Origin's Blue Ring test satellite, but the giant first stage missed its landing at sea. For NG-2, Blue Origin is going for redemption, not just sending Escapade on its way to Mars, but also trying again to land and recover that 57.5-meter booster on a drone ship in the Atlantic. Ha! Really? Landing on a drone ship? Sounds like they're just replaying the goal they already failed at on New Glenn's first flight. Blue Origin's New Glenn is pushing hard, but it's trailing SpaceX's relentless pace. While SpaceX is already flying Starship with proven reliability, Blue Origin is still chasing its first booster landing. The September 29th NG-2 launch might send Escapade to Mars, but catching up is a tall order when SpaceX is light years ahead. So, will Blue Origin actually pull off NG-2 the way they hope, or